You're listening to the Third Coast Gridiron H-Town's podcast on the LSG Network with your host, Marc Henry.
Can you dig it? The season is here, man, and we're so hyped up and ready to go. This is Marc Henry here with the Third Coast Gridiron on the LSG Network, the authority for high school football in the state of Texas. What it do? I'm back, man. Season 5 of the Third Coast Gridiron, man. We appreciate everybody that's been tapping in with us the last few years, but this is one of the biggest seasons that I can remember in Texas high school football. And, of course, each week we're going to break down the teams, players, talk a little recruiting, and everything under the sun that goes down in H-Town high school football, man. We appreciate you tapping in with us. We got a lot of things that we're going to talk about to break it down in week 0. We're going to talk top teams, some top quarterbacks in the H. And listen, we have one of the biggest games in week 0 right in the H. H-Town versus D-Town, Houston, Dallas, 6A, 5A, North Shore, and then South Oak Cliff as they come down I-45 to take on the Mustangs. We'll talk about that and more right here on the TCG on the Third Coast Gridiron on the Lone Star Gridiron Network, the authority for high school football. We'll take a small break and we will come back and get
Looking to boost your company's marketing? Look no further than Fresh Media Works. Podcasting is the best way to promote your brand and increase your customer base. You can create your own show, be a guest on other podcasts, or advertise on existing podcasts to reach a valuable audience. Don't wait. Start elevating your marketing game today with Fresh Media Works. Call now, 713-269-4620, or find us online at freshmediaworks.com/podcasting.
All right, we're back here on the Third Coast Gridiron. Let's talk teams to look out for this season. We'll start with the big boys in the 6A ranks. Of course, North Shore, they made it to state last year. They're perennial power. You got Coach Gaston coming in and leading those guys back to the state championship, and they lost to Duncanville. But new season, listen, they're back. They got 14 returning starters. Caleb Bailey's probably one of the better quarterbacks in the state. Is returning for his senior year. Of course, the number 1 cornerback in the country in the class 2025 resides on the east side in Devin Sanchez. They got some pieces on the offensive side. Of course, Quanell X is one of those guys. Deion DeBlanc, DeAndre Hardeman Jr., Jacoby Issam on the offensive line. Chase Calcutt is another top-flight cornerback, class 2026 over there at North Shore. So the talent is there. Don't be surprised if these guys make another run. I expect them to be back in Jerrywell. I really do. I think that these guys are hungry for it. I happened to be at the game last year. It just looks like, that Duncanville was just the best team that night. And definitely I think that this is something that, everybody on the east side is looking forward to. They got a big game week 1. We'll talk about that towards the end of the show. Summer Creek's a team that you definitely want to take a look at and know about. Blake Thomas is a guy that's going to be at the helm of that offense. You got Chad Wolfuck, who's a TCU commit, coming off the edge. So Summer Creek's going to be a team that you need to know about coming in. Atascocita, the Eagles. Listen, shout out to my guy Zion Brown. We had him as a guest several times. He was one of the better quarterbacks coming out of the Atascocita in that area in a long time. But Torrey Blaylock, the Oklahoma commit, and Corday Mack are 2 running backs that'll pace Atascocita this year. And also, Broderick Malone's a guy over there on the offensive side that you need to know about for Atascocita. But they have a tough schedule out the gate. They go against Lamar week 0, and that they're still in that tough district North Shore, Summer Creek, those guys are still in there. So Atascocita is a team that you definitely want to know about. I expect them to be a playoff team coming out of H as well. Ridge Point's a team that features one of the best quarterbacks in the state in Austin Carlisle, who's a U of H commit. Dane Jones is also a talented wide receiver that he'll have to be able to throw the ball to, who's also a TCU commit. And the defense returns 5 starters that include Gil Jackson and Bryson Weber, who committed to Texas Tech. So listen, These guys are going to be a good team. Take that back. It's Gil Jackson, who's committed to Texas Tech, and Bryson Weber, who's committed to Nebraska. Which points a talented team that's had playoff runs the last couple of years, and I expect those guys to be right back in it. Shadow Creek's been a perennial power in the H the last few years, and they return a talented team. I think the big thing is they have a quarterback in JoJo Stewart who can get it done. He's got some experience, and you know that this is going to be a team that you'll hear about when it comes to making deep playoff runs. Shadow Creek is one of those teams. Of course, you can't talk about H-Town High School football and not mention the Katy Tigers and Coach Gary Joseph. These guys will definitely be having something to say when it comes to playoff football. Offensively, they got some key pieces back in Tremaine Hill and Gunnar Nelson. Expect the Tigers to be very good. It's one of those things where they just kind of regroup. They don't, they don't fall off very often when it comes to being a perennial power, not just in the Houston area, but definitely in the state. That's a team that you definitely want to keep an eye on. Uh, High Tower's a great team as well. They made a great playoff run last season, but this is one of those teams that's been very good. They have a new quarterback this year in Camden Emmanuel, who's committed to Army. He'll be a guy that'll lead the offense defensively. Cornerback Cade Phillips is one of those guys that you need to know about, and of course Michael Amy III, a Rice commit. He's a guy that can get it done on the defensive side. Now Westfield. The biggest question about those guys is, shout out to Matt Meekins, who retired after 9 seasons over there. They are going to be a team that's going to be looked at, when you change coaches like that, it's just a thing of trying to make sure that you continue that tradition. Westfield's always been that team that has been right on the cusp of making it to Jerry World. They're usually 3 to 4 rounds deep. They have some of the most talented players, definitely in the Houston area. But my guy, shout out to Taj Atkins. He's graduated, man, and he was a big offensive weapon for those guys for years. He's gone on to the collegiate ranks, so we will see what happens. I think the transition to Dismar Black will definitely be something that you'll be looking forward to seeing. And I think the Westfield's up to the challenge. Bridgeland's another team that I think is very interesting. They have 2 of the best offensive linemen in the state, in Jonte Newman and Ryan Foji. Newman's committed to Texas A&M and Foji, Oklahoma. Jet Lewis is going to be the catalyst under center, man. And, Jet Lewis is a prospect that we'll probably be talking about within these first few games, just putting up big numbers and leading that Bridgeland offense. Of course, Bridgeland, since they've been on the scene here the last few years, has been one of those teams that's been right on the cusp of making those deep playoff runs, but, kind of getting knocked out in the 3rd or 4th round. And those guys will be having something to say about that. But they have 2 of the best offensive linemen in the state. That's going to be key. Those guys are going on to the next level. They're committed to A&M and Oklahoma, respectively. I expect Bridgeland to be, one of those teams that'll be the 3rd, 4th round type of team when it comes to playoff runs. Now, this is an interesting team here when we talk about the Willis Wildcats. They're replacing Gatorade Player of the Year, one of the best to come through in DJ Lagway, who's now in Florida. That's a big hole. Those are big shoes to fill. But they have one of the most dynamic players in the state, in Jermaine Bishop. He's a do-it-all type player. He plays on both sides of the ball. Of course, he's a big-time college recruit at the cornerback position. But I also think that they will get the ball to him definitely on offense. He was the leading receiver last year. Jalen Mickens is one of the best receivers in the state of Texas. He returns. And listen, I think that when you get Jay Mick the ball, you expect big plays to happen. Had a chance to see a lot of Mickens on the camp circuits and 7-on-7 circuits. He's a dynamic player that you want to have the ball in your hands. A couple of more teams that we'll keep our eye on. Klein Collins, one of the most consistent programs definitely in the last few years. They have to replace a big time player in Tucker Parks. Lots of guys and lots of talent over in the Klein area. But there'll be a team to watch. Cy-Fair, the Lamar Texans, Stratford is a team to watch. Klein Kane, they'll have to roll out a new starting quarterback, but they have some returning guys that'll make it interesting. I expect them to be a playoff team. The Woodlands is another team that we have to watch. They're replacing a guy that seems like he was there for a long time and maybe retired, has gone on to play at Wisconsin. Katie Jordan. Of course, Andrew Marsh is one of the top players in the state of Texas, a recent Michigan commit. So he'll have something to say about that. But, man, that's just a few teams that we'd like to see that we'll keep our eye on in the 6A ranks. We'll pause here for a quick commercial break, and we'll come back and we'll talk 5A and 4A ball right here on the Third Coast Gridiron, the authority for high school football, only on the Lone Star Gridiron Network.
Did you play Texas high school football? If you did, you're part of an elite group, the Brotherhood of Texas High School Football. All football players, past and present, who have ever suited up in the Lone Star State are eligible. Go to LoneStarGridiron.com/brotherhood. And thank you for the part you played in the greatest sport in the greatest state.
Let's talk a few 5A teams. Fort Bend Marshall's an interesting team, always talented. One of those teams that's a perennial playoff team. But I think Randall's a team. Shout out to my guy, Coach Randall over there. He's got a talented bunch. Landon Williams-Callis is one of the top 2027 playmakers in the state of Texas, being recruited nationally. He's a guy that can get it done. Really came on the scene as a freshman and really was a standout over there. I think he and Chase Sims is another guy on the defensive side that you need to know about when it comes to Randall. I think they'll have something to say. They're in that 5A Division II region, and they're a big-time team that I think will make a playoff run as well. Lake Creek's a team coming out of the Montgomery County area that you definitely need to know about. Iowa Colony, talented team that's looking to make some noise as they move up to 5A. Galveston Ball, shout out to my guy, Jonah Williams, Texas commit recently. He's a two-sport athlete, really three sports. He is a basketball player in the past, but I think baseball, he's a guy that's going to be probably drafted pretty high in the next Major League Baseball draft. But he made a big commitment recently over at Galveston Ball, and he's going to be a guy coming into a senior year that you're going to need to know about over there. If you don't already know about Jonah Williams, you will. He's a Texas commit, big-time safety, really a guy that can do it on both sides of the football. I really think that, Galveston Ball's been that team previous years. They went undefeated. Then they made a deep playoff run last year. I think they'll be right back in the thick of things as well. Crosby's another team to watch, Texas City as well. You can't forget about the Huntsville Hornets over in 5A. There's a few teams around the Houston area that you definitely need to know about. 4A, we can talk about Belleville. They have one of the most talented, I think, running backs in the state of Texas in D.D. Murray. Had a chance to see those guys make a big playoff run. They went to state and lost to eventual champion Gilmer last year. But D.D. Murray is a guy that I think, college coaches are going to start to really jump on here at the beginning of the season. Of course, they have DJ Sanders, the Texas A&M commit on the defensive line, who's just one of those guys that you have to account for. He's almost unstoppable, unblockable down in the trenches. But I think Belleville's going to be right back in the thick of things when you come to talking about making a playoff run. Hitchcock's one of the most talented teams that you're going to see. And also Columbus, those guys are really, really good. They got one of the best players in the state, and Grayson Rigdon, who's coming up from the six-man ranks. He's been one of the best players in the state the last couple of years. I think that's a valuable weapon that Columbus is getting. He's a guy that can get it done on both sides of the ball, and you're going to hear about this guy on Friday nights this fall. He's like that. And I really, really looking forward to getting a chance to see him play up close and personal. Saw him at state. And listen, I think he's going to do the same thing he's been doing on the on the six-man level that he's going to do, for over there at Columbus. I really think that those guys have a chance to be really, really good over there. Bay City, Campo, two teams that we talk about all the time when it comes to playoff runs historically. And those teams will be having something to say when it comes to playoff ball, man. You can't get it more. You can't be so more excited like this that we are, man, about this week 0 and the things that are coming out high school football wise here in the state of Texas and definitely in the H, man. But I think these teams that we talked about will be playoff teams. I think these teams will, eventually when it's all said and done, each one of these teams that we've talked about here in the beginning, from the 6A to the 3A and 4A ranks around the H, I have something to say when it comes to talk about playoff time and making big runs in playoffs. So historically, these teams have been very good, and this is what you want. It's just about being great. It's just about being, hitting all cylinders at the right time, and that's what you want, man. So, man, I can't wait to see this, man. We're going to talk about the big game of the week here towards the end of ends of the Third Coast Gridiron today, but we're going to pause, take another small break, and we're going to talk about some of the signal callers that we look forward to seeing here in the season. The fall is here. The Third Coast Gridiron will definitely be in the building for some of these games and some of these guys. But let's talk quarterbacks, man. We'll pause, take a break, man. Shout out to the Lone Star Gridiron Network for having the Third Coast Gridiron for our 5th season. And we'll pause. We'll be right back.
Hey, you there. Yes, you. Have you ever thought about unleashing the power of AI for your business? Fresh Media Works is here to make it happen. From boosting productivity to revolutionizing customer experiences, AI holds endless possibilities. A small investment in AI, combined with our expert guidance, will begin to transform your business quickly. Ready to dive in? Give us a call now at 713-269-4620.
Let's talk quarterback play. We're going to talk about some of the best quarterbacks that you'll see under the Friday Night Lights here in H-Town this season. We'll start on the east side with Caleb Bailey, who's now a senior. As a freshman, he took North Shore all the way to the state championship and was first team All-Grade at Houston last season, completing 74% of his passes for over 3,100 yards and 36 touchdowns. He also rushed for almost 800 yards and 15 scores as he led North Shore back to the 6A Division I championship game, but they came up short against Duncanville. I think that he's on a mission. Anytime you see Caleb Bailey on the field, he's dynamic. He's a guy that can get it done through the air or on the ground. He'll probably be one of the better players in the state, not just in Houston this year. Austin Carlisle, who we talked about a little bit earlier, committed to Houston for Fort Bend Ridge Point. Is a guy that you want to see. You want to pull up on Austin. He can get it done on the ground or through the air. Threw for over 30,000 yards and 34 touchdowns with only 5 picks last season. Also rushed for over 500 yards and 10 scores. Aaron DeLeon from Stratford is one of those guys that you want to see. He's a definitely must-see type of guy that you want to see on Friday nights. Over 3,300 yards and 42 touchdowns. Also led Stratford in rushing with over 500 yards and 12 scores on the ground. He's a dual threat guy. He's a guy that you want to get eyes on, man, for sure. Blake Thomas, Summer Creek. We talked about him earlier when we talked about Summer Creek. He's committed to Lamar. He led Summer Creek to the state title game where they lost to DeSoto, but he's a guy that can get it done through the air and on the ground, and he's a dual threat for sure. I look for Thomas to really lead the charge for Summer Creek this season, and he's going to be a guy that you want to know over there in the Humble area. He really gets it done through the air, over 2,400 yards and 27 touchdowns, and he gets it done on the ground with over 811 scores last season. Jackson Hamilton, who's committed to Maryland, is one of those guys that you want to see for sure. He's going to give Manville a chance to be in every game that they play this year, and he's a great signal caller over there. JoJo Stewart, who's at Shadow Creek, we talked about him when we talked about Shadow Creek earlier. He threw for over 2,600 yards and 29 touchdowns last year. I think that Shadow Creek's got their signal caller. They're probably one of the best quarterbacks that you're going to see come out of Shadow Creek here in the last couple of years. He's going to give the Sharks a chance to be a playoff team. Aiden Martin from Tomball Memorial. Listen, when you talk about a guy who's surgical with the football in the passing game, it's Aiden Martin. I've had a chance to see Martin a lot this offseason on the 7-on-7 circuit, also in the camp circuits. He can flat out spin it. And I really think that he's one of those guys that's kind of been under the radar that college coaches should really take a strong look at. Over 3,000 yards of total offense last year, 32 touchdowns passing. Aiden Martin is a next-level quarterback, and I think college coaches are really going to see that. Tomball Memorial is going to be a team that, quiet as kept, is going to make a little run there. Get your eyes on this guy. If college coaches are listening to this, Aiden Martin is like that. He can play. And he's a guy that I definitely think will have Tomball Memorial looking for a playoff spot when it comes to getting into the playoffs this year. Bryson Broadway, Magnolia West, he's been steady Eddie over there. He's been playing some great ball here for the last few years from Magnolia West. Threw for over 2,400 yards and 27 touchdowns last year. Is committed to Stephen F. Austin. Camden Emmanuel Hightower. Of course, we talked about him when we talked about Hightower as a team. He's committed to Army. Listen, he's a guy that can get it done on the ground, through the air. He'll have Hightower right there when it comes to making that playoff run this year. Expect to hear his name a lot. Miles Dent over at Westfield's one of those guys that's been flying under the radar. I think he's going to be a guy, a catalyst to get Westfield back where they need to be. He can ball. He's a player over there. Definitely want to get eyes on him. College coaches want to see a guy that can play at the next level, and I think that Dent's that type of guy. You definitely want to see him on the field this year. Here's another interesting guy that I think is a top prospect that maybe some people don't talk about around the state, but definitely he's one of the best signal callers in the age, and that's Christian Nunley over at Conroe. He's a playmaker. He can get it done through the air and on the ground. Had a chance to see Nunley this spring at the 7-on-7 circuits and definitely in the camp scene. Nunley can ball. He's a guy that's going to have Conroe, who's quiet as kept. Listen, they already have a great team over there. Nunley's that guy. You definitely want to see this guy. You definitely want to pull up on this guy. Another guy in the Conroe area is Grant Smith, the junior for Grand Oaks. Grand Oaks is one of those programs that's been around a couple of years, kind of getting their feet wet. I think that Grant Smith is a guy in the state that you need to know about. Now, you're not going to hear a lot about Grand Oaks because they just weren't ready to take that next step yet. I think that Grant Smith is the guy that gets Grand Oaks to the playoffs this year. He's already got several Power 4 programs. He's a 3-star recruit that have been looking at him. He's got a tremendous upside. And I had a chance to meet Grant Smith when he was a 7th or 8th grader. You could see kind of the skill set early, but now he's really matured into it size-wise, arm strength. He's always been a guy that could see the defense very well. Grant Smith over Grand Oaks is a guy you need to know. Jet Lewis, senior at Bridgeland. He's been flying under the radar the last few years. He had a great season last year. Over 2,000 yards passing and 24 touchdowns. Jet Lewis is a guy on the recruiting trail that I think with the first 5 or 6 games in, you'll start to see those offers come off the board for him. He's a guy over at Bridgeland. Of course, he's got a great offensive line in front of him. He's a guy that can get it done. A couple more names we'll break out to you here, and we'll move on. Albert Brown at Nimitz, Gunnar Nelson at Katy, Austin Cassette at Cypress Ranch, Julian Salazar at Clear Springs. Those are some of the guys definitely you want to check out. Some guys in the 5A ranks real quick. Eli Marcos, who's committed to Tulsa, is a fabulous quarterback. I had a chance to see Marcos the last 2 years on the camp scene in the 7-7 circuit. He can flat out spin it. He's a guy that can run it as well. Big, strong guy, over 1,500 yards and 18 touchdowns last year, and he got it done on the ground, rushing for 11 touchdowns. Eli Marcos is a baller. You definitely want to pull up and see him. and he'll be a reason that Lake Creek, they went undefeated last year, and they got some ballers over there. But Eli Marcos under center gives them a chance to win every game. Carson White at Iowa Colony was a big reason that they got off to a strong start in 2023. Now he's a sophomore. This is going to be probably one of the best quarterback prospects to come out of Houston in the next few years. He's only a sophomore, over 1,600 yards passing and 17 touchdowns. He got it done. Now, we talked about Randall earlier. Of course, Landon Williams-Callis is the guy that everybody talks about, but Tyler Shrabnik is a junior, that got it done. Randall's a young program. Shout out to my guy, Coach Randall. We'll have him on the show. He's been on the show in the previous years, but he's a guy over there for Randall. Tyler is he can get it done. He's one of those guys that can get it done through the air, over 2,300 yards passing and 27 touchdowns on last season. Kaiden Barker's a guy really been high on over at Galveston Ball the last 2 years, and he's going to be a reason that they make a deep playoff run again. Over 2,000 yards passing, 30 touchdowns as a sophomore. He's coming back for his junior season. Of course, Jonah Williams, the Texas commit, is his teammate, and he's a guy that he gets into offensively. Galveston Balls could be a sleeper coming out of age when it talks to making playoff runs. Reggie Williams over at Montgomery had a fabulous season last year, over 2,300 yards of total offense and 24 touchdowns. He's a senior now. He's a guy that you need to know. You get a chance to see Montgomery play. I know that they didn't have a great season last year, but he could be the guy that could turn it around and get them in the playoffs this year. Reggie Williams at Montgomery is a guy you need to know in the quarterback position. A couple of more guys here before we change gears and talk about the big game of the week. Caden Johnson, Fort Bend Marshall. Listen, when you talk about quarterback prospects in the state of Texas in the class of 2026, Johnson is a guy that you need to know. He's going to have a big season this year. He's going to be a reason that Fort Bend Marshall could get to that next level. When we say next level, make a state championship run. I really think that Johnson has a big upside. He's a guy that you definitely want to pull up on. Of course, anytime you see a Fort Bend Marshall game, you're definitely going to see some of the top prospects in the state of Texas, and I think that this guy's going to develop into one of those guys. Get up on him, man. The college coaches definitely will be watching this guy. He's got, he's got a couple of offers under his belt, but I think this year he really takes that next step and moves himself into one of the top quarterbacks in the Houston area coming out of Fort Bend Marshall. Aaron Schroebel. We talked about Columbus earlier. This guy can flat out spin it. Of course, we know that, he's one of those guys that kind of been flying under the radar. But last year he had a great season. Now check this out. I'm going to spit this number out at you. Over 7,600 yards and 94 touchdowns in 3 seasons at Columbus. They had a great season last year. I think that these guys have a chance to come out of the 3A ranks and make it to Jerry Well, and Schobel's going to be a reason that they get it done. Big-time quarterbacks prospect. He's committed to TCU. He's got a big arm. Talking about a guy that's about 6'4", 6'5". He can spin it. And then last but not least, we're going to talk about Hitchcock. I think I talked about Hitchcock a little earlier. Lloyd Jones Jr. committed to Texas Tech, or Lloyd Jones III committed to Texas Tech, is one of those guys. We're talking about a guy who can flat out spin it. Texas Tech is getting a real one here. Over 6,600 yards of total offense and 92 touchdowns in 2 seasons at Hitchcock. I think this guy's next level talent. Of course he is. He's been one of the highly recruited guys coming out of the state of Texas, committed to Texas Tech. You're talking about a guy who can get it done. Hitchcock's another sleeper down there that you might want to see and talk about as far as it goes for making playoff runs. I expect them to be there, have a chance to go to Jerry World. And the reason they're going to be in that type of conversation when it comes to making playoff runs, Lloyd Jones III is a guy that's getting it done. You need to know about this guy, man. Again, these are some of the top quarterbacks in the Houston area that we're looking forward to seeing here in 2024. Definitely pull up on them if you can, man. There's a lot of big high school football fans. I was one of those guys that just pulled up and saw the top talent. Of course, I'm still that guy that pulls up and watches and talks about the top talent. These are some of the top signal callers that you'll see in the Houston area this year. Big game that we're going to talk about here and break that down before we get out of here on the TCG, the Third Coast Gridiron. Let's talk Week 0 matchups, and you can't get bigger in the state of Texas than North Shore and South Oak Cliff. South Oak Cliff is led by Coach Jason Todd. They've been to 3 straight state championships, won 2 out of 3. Big game last year up at Jerry World. They come up short against Port Neches Groves. But North Shore, on the other hand, also was at Jerry World, and they came up short. This is a Houston-Dallas matchup for bragging rights. Anytime you talk about H-Town and D-Town, it's always something to be talked about. This is one of the bigger games in the state of Texas, and it just happens to be in the H on the east side. It'll be at Galena Park. ISD Stadium, we will be in the house for that game. Both teams have very, very good defenses. You know that South Oak Cliff is going to be very good defensively every year. A couple of guys that you need to know about: Jaden Shelton at the linebacker position is an Arkansas commit. He's one of those guys. Jamarian Phillips is another linebacker that they have. Kamarian Morgan, a Baylor commit, coming off the edge. And they have one of the best 2026 cornerbacks in the state of Texas in Marcel Gibson Jr. South Oak Cliff's loaded. Been hearing great things about those guys. They're always really good in the trenches. They will be good up front. This will be a challenge for North Shore. Of course, Caleb Bailey on the offensive side. We talked about Caleb already. He's going to have to play one of his better games. Of course, North Shore is loaded offensively with Quanell X Jr., Quanell Farrakhan Jr., DeAndre Blanc, DeAndre Hardeman Jr. This is going to be a great matchup. I expect this to be, one of those 21-14, maybe 21-10 type of games. I think the East Side is going to be rocking. This is a game that you want to pull up and get there early. It's one of those type of games. It's a big matchup for Week 0, for Week 1 coming out of the gate, where you get 2 state finalists in the 5A and 6A ranks on the field. I think that Devin Sanchez is one of the best cornerbacks. We know he's one of the best cornerbacks in the country, the Ohio State commit. If South Oak Cliff wants to get the passing game going, they're going to have to do it quick, try to keep it away from Sanchez, who's one of those ball hogs. Calcut on the other side. This is a tough matchup. But, if you know anything about high school football, Coach Jason Todd and that South Oak Cliff staff is one of the best in the country. X's and O's wise, you can't beat those guys. This is a monumental matchup. We'll be in the house for that. Big, big game. A couple more games before we get out here. Klein Kane versus Cy Fair. Galveston Ball at Manville. It's a great matchup as well. You got a guy like Jonah Williams who's going to be roaming that secondary. I mean, this guy had 4 pick sixes last year. You want to keep the ball away from him. Manville's a very good team. That should be a great game on Thursday as well. Fulshire and Pearland's a big game. We talked about Lamar and the Atascocita a little bit. Now, Zion Brown's going on to college, so they're going to be breaking in a new signal caller. But you still have Torrey Blaylock, the Oklahoma commit, Corday Mack. These 2 guys are best 1-2 punch in the area and possibly in the state. Lamar's going to have their hands full with those guys. A couple of Friday games before we get out of here. Ridge Point, we talked about Austin Carlisle takes on Clear Springs. Katy and Dickinson, that's a really, really great matchup coming out of Week 0. Of course, Gary Joseph and those guys. They're a team that's been a perennial power in the Houston area for a number of years. Gunnar Nelson at quarterback. Tremaine Hill is a guy coming back for Katy and Dickinson. Listen, they've been strong the last couple of years. And, Coach John Snelson will have the Gators ready to play, no doubt about it. Dickinson's offense is one of those offenses that you want to see and pull up on. They have a Bowling Green commit in Jeremiah Scobie and TCU commit Mason Peterson also. Those are 2 big weapons offensively that you'll look to see over at Dickinson. Again, that's a 7 p.m. kickoff. Katy goes to Dickinson. Strong matchup coming out of the gate. Westfield and Seed Kings, another game that you might want to pull up on. Shadow Creek and Summer Creek, the Battle of the Creeks. I think that's a great matchup. Again, we talked about Blake Thomas and Chad Woolfolk for Summer Creek. That'll be 2 guys that you'll want to see. And those guys will have something to say about the outcome of that game. A couple of more games to watch that I think will be interesting. Tompkins, Cypress Ranch, Klein Collins. This is the first year they hadn't had Tucker Parks. And Tucker Parks is one of the better players for 4 years over there. Who do they bring out on the center? The center for Klein Collins will be interesting. Columbus and Cuero should be a great matchup. Cuero's a perennial playoff team in the state of Texas. At Columbus, we talked about Adam Schobel, one of the best quarterbacks in the state, definitely coming out. But, man, listen, we're going to be rolling out some new things. We'll talk about a little recruiting, some top prospects this year. We'll have a couple of guests coming through next week as we get ready to roll out the Third Coast Gridiron for the 2024 season right here on the LSG Network, the authority for high school football. You can follow us on Twitter at Third Gridiron. Also, check out the Top Texas Prospect Show with me and my guy Matt Davidson as we kind of give you a broad stroke of the entire state, not just H-Town, man. Shout out to everybody at the LSG Network. Again, this is the 5th season, episode 1 of the Third Coast Gridiron, the TCG, on the LSG Network, the authority for high school football, man. We'll come back and talk about everything next week that went down in H-Town. We out.